Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here tonight. My name is Richard Gage, AIA. I've been a practicing architect for 20 years, and I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects. I became interested in the World Trade Center high-rise collapses on 9/11 after hearing the startling conclusions of a reluctant 9/11 researcher, David Ray Griffin, on San Francisco Bay Area's KPFA radio, Guns and Butter, with Bonnie Faulkner in March of 2006. This has changed my life radically and launched my own personal and professional quest for 9/11 truth, inspiring me to found Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which now numbers hundreds of architects and engineers who are demanding a real investigation into the destruction of these buildings. I'm employed with a San Francisco Bay Area architecture firm, which, by the way, has no affiliation with my work in 9/11. Like many other architects, though, I've designed numerous fireproof steel frame buildings in my career, including these $3 and $10 million gymnasiums and the day-to-day construction administration services for this $120 million high school in San Ramon, California. I'm now working on a $400 million project in Nevada with almost 2 million square feet of retail, parking structure, and fireproofed steel-framed mid-rise office space, with over 1,200 tons of steel framing altogether. I'd like to start by thanking each and every one of you for being willing to consider the very difficult subject of the destruction of the World Trade Center and its staggering loss of life on 9/11. Just as architecture and engineering projects are sometimes joyful, sometimes quite difficult, this particular project has proven to be extremely difficult. Not difficult in terms of reaching conclusions, but difficult in terms of the implications of those conclusions and finding people who are open-minded enough to be willing to hear the facts about these building collapses. Check out every fact that we point out, because it's extremely important that we know the whole truth about this event. After all, it served as the pretext for the invasion of 2 countries in which already over 1 million people have perished. Also as the pretext for the loss of many of our own cherished liberties here at home in the United States through recent legislation such as the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, and the forthcoming Senate Bill 1959, the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Act, in which many of us can be named a terrorist and have no right to an attorney or trial by jury. Another 9/11 could happen again if we don't dedicate ourselves to finding out exactly what happened and why, and to bringing those actually responsible to justice. What do I mean it could happen again? Well, basically, we're promised another 9/11 by members of the Congress, the media, and the Bush administration, with official statements such as this: the next attack will make September 11th pale by comparison. A nuclear weapon in the middle of one of our own cities. A nuclear terrorist attack on the U.S. could be imminent. Weapon of mass destruction this summer or early fall. It'll be much bigger than 9/11. And Michael Chertoff, a gut feeling that attacks were imminent last summer without any evidence or facts suggesting that. These are among the many reasons that we must peer into the painful part of our recent history and to re-examine the relatively new physical evidence from 9/11 which we have not seen in the mainstream media, and to find out why, for instance, a 2006 poll by the New York Times and CBS reveals that 28% of Americans believe that the Bush administration is lying, and not just about Iraq, but about the events of 9/11. And Time magazine reporting that 36% of Americans consider it likely or somewhat likely that government officials either allowed the attacks to be carried out or carried them out themselves. And an even more recent poll from Zogby in 2007, finding 51% of Americans want Congress to probe the president and the vice president about 9/11. Of even greater concern, another poll that year by Scripps Howard, Ohio University, which found that a shocking 16% of Americans believe that the World Trade Center Twin Towers were brought down by explosives. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, claims they found no evidence for explosive demolition at the Twin Towers. Later, they admit that they never looked for it. How can you find what you are not looking for? Well, architects, engineers, scientists, and many others looked for it, and it was not hard to find. We've been speaking about it for 2 years now in over 36 cities, in a dozen states, and in Canada. We're proud to be a part of the international 9/11 Truth movement, which is growing by millions every year. We now have hundreds of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth demanding a real investigation. This is our website. You can find on the right side the bullet points of information that we're going to be going through today. It's ae911truth.org. On the left side, you'll see the PowerPoint. You can step through it at your own pace because you may not have time to follow and read all the text and absorb the information that we're rapidly going to be going through. You can also watch the DVD on the left side, and you can purchase the DVD, of course, online. You can sign the petition after you find yourself convinced that this evidence is something worth looking at. Let's get something clear from the start. The ever-growing number of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are not conspiracy theorists. We're building and technical professionals looking at the science-based forensic evidence in the destruction of these high-rises on 9/11. As Joel Hirshhorn, PhD, says, first, let the technical truths emerge. Then, if necessary, cope with the inevitable conspiracy and other questions. Tonight, we're presenting to you the technical truths, the evidence found for the explosive demolition of all 3 World Trade Center high-rise collapses on 9/11, the iconic Twin Towers and the mysterious Building 7. 9/11. Just the utterance of it brings us right back to the terror-filled morning. We were subjected to these shocking attacks, killing thousands of Americans, destroying cultural icons. The 6 years has given us time to step back and examine these events more objectively, to step back from the shock-induced trance, really, to evaluate the relatively new evidence that's only come out in the last couple of years, and to re-examine these 3 high-rise collapses more objectively. Let's begin with an overview of the events of that morning in order to start us off on the same page, looking at the jets and the impacts and how this myth developed.
On September 11th, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes had flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the buildings to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media to a bewildered audience.
So when it was attacked again, he immediately...
Elements of the myth. The impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the buildings failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust.
We ran through the building, it went into the...
Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
We need to look for these kinds of people and these kinds of events that are the first ones interviewed by mainstream media, planting the official story in the minds of people.
The myth bled into the FEMA report and was echoed by the experts.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire, that caused collapse.
Well, let's take a look at that. What we do is we apply the scientific method, which many of us learned in 7th and 8th grade.